and our development partners need to urgently address.
No society that leaves a significant number of its people behind can prosper in a sustainable manner. What the challenge of development really is a challenge of opportunities being open to all.
The problem of youth unemployment in Nigeria is very alarming. According to the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics report for the first quarter of 2016, unemployment and underemployment was highest for persons in the labor force between the ages of 15 to 34 years, which represents the youth population.
CVL is involved in a program of empowering 100 young people in the Ajegunle area to be entrepreneurs, to be people who create value, create wealth for their own good and for the benefit of general economy. For very clear and specific reasons. No society that leaves a significant number of its people behind can prosper in a sustainable manner. What the challenge of development really is a challenge of opportunities being open to all. And there can be demographic challenges to having opportunity open to all. And so certain parts of town that are quote unquote down the socio-economic ladder tend to get left behind. And because of this, we have been focused on Ajegunle for a very long time. Many years ago, I, as an individual working with another initiative, the Paradigm Initiative Nigeria, Benga Chesson, was involved in an Ajegunle project that took young people, provided them IT skills, and many escaped the neighborhood through that program. I know the British High Commission is particularly proud of one or two who, through placements in the British High Commission, continue to work even for the British High Commission till date, not just in Lagos, but in Abuja. And so this passion to work with the people of that area has remained. We have had CVL initiatives with DFID, which we provided water, boreholes, and running water for parts of the community. And so when the need to help build a whole new generation of entrepreneurs for our country so that we can prosper came up, Ajegunle was a natural. And finding partners like Citibank Foundation and all of that was just greater impetus for going in to create more opportunities for more of the citizens.
The unemployment rate for those within the ages of 15 to 24 was at 21.5% in the first quarter of 2016, from 19% of the fourth quarter of 2015 and 17.8% in the third quarter of 2015. For those in the labor force within the ages of 25 to 34, unemployment rose to 12.9% in the first quarter of 2016 from 11.4% in the fourth quarter of 2015. The Center for Values and Leadership Young Entrepreneurship Training Program is a one-year project funded by CVL partners. It is an intensive entrepreneurship development program initiated for youths in Nigeria between the ages of 18 to 35 years to provide them with business support such as technical know-how, business information, startups, and access to financial links. It is intended to enhance the capacity of community-based youths who run small businesses or have the intention to own and run sustainable enterprises. Target beneficiaries are youths living in densely populated slums and poor neighborhoods in Nigeria. Our overall goal is to reduce youth unemployment in Nigeria through capacity building in entrepreneurship. The CVL Young Entrepreneurship Training Program kicked off with a process of selection of participants. A call for application for participants is issued to the general public. Completed application forms are returned and shortlisted applicants are notified. First stage interview is conducted following screening of qualified candidates. Final interview is conducted to select final participants. Participants undergo 2 months entrepreneurship training, followed by 2 months business mentoring sessions. A graduation ceremony is organized to award certificates and startup kits or grants to successful participants. A 6 months technical support in terms of intensive monitoring and supervision is also provided after the graduation ceremony.
In the course of the program, I've been able to study where I want my business to run. And I've also been able to study bookkeeping, that is how to record the profit and loss I have in the business. And also in the course of the program, I've also been able to know how to market, how to communicate with people.
This program has really helped me a lot. I learned so much. I think I've been able to learn about more of marketing, budgeting and accounting. With this, I've been empowered. I'm going to start up my own business.
This program, the CVL Young Entrepreneurship Training, I would say it's a very good program that has come to Ajegule, and my prayer is that this comes to stay, because it's a very good program that has come to help several of us, and I can say that I am a living testimony, to which I pray that this continues, because it's going to help many people in Ajegule and the nation as a whole.
CVL Young Entrepreneurship Training Program, it is a program that I would advise anybody that has opportunity to partake in, because it has actually taken me from the unknown to the known. Some things that...
Good morning. Rather than throwing birthdays, he gathered us every year for intellectual JoJos. It's the third day of a less noisy Lagos. It's the third day of reduction in CO2 emissions. It's the third day of compulsory fitness that we have now embarked upon. It's the third day of trekking, jogging, whatever you choose to dub it, or horse riding. I hope that we're having a good time, enjoying Esena Lagos. I know that some of us may not agree. But welcome to the 2020 edition of the Center for Values in Leadership annual lecture. My name is Jide Benson, and it's my honor and privilege to be the Master of Ceremonies. I'd like to ask that we all please rise for the national anthem. I'd like to invite two very special people with sonorous voices, TK and Blessing, to do us the honors of the national anthem in a way that will make us love our country. Please put your hands together for the delectable Blessing, accompanied by TK. While the national anthem is on, please, there should be no movement except a photographer or a video man. So ushers and every other person at the door, please stop movement at this time. National anthem.
Arise, O compatriots, Nigeria's call obey, to serve our fatherland with love and strength. serve with God and might, one nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
O God of creation, direct our noble cause, guide our leaders right, help our youth the truth to know, great lofty height attain, to live in just and truth.
Great lofty height attain,
To build a nation,
to build a nation,
to build a nation,
build a nation raised.
justice
Thank you, Blessing. Thank you, TK. See, I told you that they will sing it in a way that will make you love Nigeria. Don't you just love Nigeria? I wish the way they sang it now, by the time we all get to, we'll just be assured of 24 hours supply of electricity, that all our roads will be smooth, that our healthcare system will be very functional, and that every student in public primary school will have an iPad or a Samsung tab. Thank you very much. My name is Jay Benson once again. Welcome to the 2020 edition of the Center for Values in Leadership Annual Lecture to celebrate the birthday of Professor Pat Utomi. I'll start with a round of recognitions at this time and we'll continue later in program. It's my pleasure to recognize a person that needs no introduction, the birthday boy, the reason for whom we are gathered this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, your hands together for Professor Pat Utomi. On the journey of serving humanity, building leaders, and agitating for a greater nation, Professor Utomi has walked this journey with another professor, his darling wife, Professor Ifeoma Utomi. Please stand to be recognized. I'm standing in front of three governors, and it's a privilege that not a lot of people enjoy. Our chairman for today's occasion, a former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, eminent elder statesman, Chief Joseph Sanusi. Please stand to be recognized. What? A former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Oh, sorry, former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. I apologize, sir. I'm getting old, sir. Former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Chief Joseph Sanusi. Please stand to recognize, sir. Just wave, let people know you, sir. That was the man that signed our currency between 1999 and 2004. I apologize, sir. Okay, maybe because you are seated beside two deputy governors. That's why I said deputy governor. All right, the deputy chief captain of Lagos State. Lagos is making progress because we have an excellent team at Alausa, Dr. Obafemi Hamzat. Please stand to recognize Your Excellency. Also with glad tidings from Jigawa State, we have Deputy Governor Alhaji Umar Namidi. You're welcome, sir. Our keynote speaker for today's events, the President of the Africa Exim Bank, Dr. Benedict Oramah. Please stand to be recognized. We also have with us the founder and former chairman of Diamond Bank, Chief Pascal Dozie. Please stand to recognize, sir. Dr. Pascal Dozie is here with us. Also with us this morning is the Consul General of the South African High Commission, Mr. Darke Africa. Please stand to be recognized. We have the Group Managing Director of FBN Holdings, Mr. UK. Please stand to be recognized. Also with us is the Vice President of the Africa Business Roundtable, Mr. Godi Ibru. Please stand to be recognized, sir. We also have the Chairman of Mutual Benefits Assurance, Dr. Akin Ogumbi. Please stand to be recognized. The last in this round of recognitions, two members of the CVL board, Dr. E.J. Jidena, please stand to be recognized, and Mrs. Helen Shine, please stand to be recognized. We'll take more recognitions as we go along in the program. I'd now like to invite, for welcome address, the chairperson of the board of CVL, Professor Mrs. Ifoma Otomi. Please put your hands together for her.
Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I would like to stand on existing protocol. It is indeed my great delight and privilege at God's grace to welcome you all to yet another annual CVL lecture symposium. For the past 17 years, without break, we have tried to identify critical issues challenging national progress in Nigeria. In response to the particular issue for the season, we have tried to find leading public intellectuals, statesmen, and policymakers to rigorously canvass ideas and proffer solutions. Now, given CVL's mission of grooming the leaders with the right values to enable overcoming of challenges, we have constituted panels to interrogate ideas from these annual talkfests. The annual sessions have featured former Nigerian and foreign heads of states, and this includes General Yakubu Gowon, and then globally renowned scholars and some simple people. And today is very appropriate to extend our gratitude to past speakers from, like I mentioned earlier, General Yakubu Gowon, then President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, Liberian President George Weah, to Professors Richard Joseph, Ibrahim Gambari, and Peter Lewis from the United States. Then also to legislators from both sides of the Atlantic, like Olga Maitland from the UK, and Congressman Jerry Weller from the United States of America. All these people left us not only quality thoughts, but also fond memories. Now, some of these annual sections have been punctuated with some, what do I call it, comic moments. Now, who will forget the MC at one of our past annual sessions prostrating in full right on this podium after he made a joke or two on Baba, President Obasanjo? I think he's here. That's the culprit. He lay flat out here. And then, when President Obasanjo was called up to speak, he came up the podium and pulled off his complete agbada. Or of Okolie from the United Kingdom, who was delivering his speech here on this podium when the Ooni of Ife's arrival was heralded by much clatter and noise, and the poor man was scared. In a high season of Boko Haram, even Governor Ambode, who was sitting right there, was not sure if it was not a security breach approaching him. Professor Collier nearly had to be assured not to run for their life. Now, today, we have a very rich bouquet for us today. We have a panel constituted, very high-powered panel, and it is hoped that the conversations from today will go a long way to impacting on all and for a positive outcome on our country, Nigeria. Now, let me close by thanking our keynote speaker, Professor Benedict Oke-Orama, for all the trouble he took to join us here today. And to you, our wonderful guests, for honoring our invitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ifeoma Otomi. Where I come from, they say that the ram that retreats will come forward with greater vigor. So, on the day she spoke about that President Obasanjo and I exchanged fisticuffs, I didn't want to disgrace an old man, so it was better for me to beat a retreat. And Yoruba people say that telebi bati mebi elebi. That means if the owner of the Ebi knows that he has committed Ebi, he will not stay on the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, your hands together for Professor Ifeoma Otomi. And on that note, I'd like to invite the former signatory to Nigeria's currency and former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Chief Joseph Sanusi. You're welcome, sir. As he comes up, let me take a moment to recognize the Deputy Governor of Edo State, Honorable Philip Schreiber. You're welcome, Your Excellency.
Good morning, everybody. The chief host, Professor Pat Utomi, the founder of CVL, and his lovely wife, Professor Utomi, who has just spoken. We are here today to honor the invitation of this great couple. To save time, I will stay on the existing protocol, but I will mention our keynote speaker, Professor Benedict Orama.
President of African Export-Import Bank, all invited guests, panelists, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen. Warmly again, I say good morning to you all and add my voice to that of Professor Utomi, wife of our chief host. I'm happy to be in your midst this morning and particularly honored to be chairman today. I have been told that CVL has been running this symposium for 17 years. This is most commendable. Join me in congratulating the founder and his wife about this program. I have known Pat for a while, and I have always admired him. His growth and development as well as his professional achievements. Most admirable is his tenacity and commitment to playing his part in nation building. Pat is ever striving to make a difference and ever ready to give his time, his intellect, his resources passionately to advance the public good. I watched the Patito gang and I found it extremely interesting, and I believe it's a great way of influencing public opinion. Well done, Pat. Our topic today is intra-African trade, growth, and economic development. Intra-trade has been with us in one form or the other for a long while. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, was created in May 1975 in Lagos. ECOWAS was established to promote cooperation and integration in order to create an economic and monetary union for promoting economic growth and development in West Africa. As we get ready for the African Continental Free Trade Zone area, we must pause and reflect on how far we have come with the initial dreams of ECOWAS. Where are we? What did we get right? What has not gone very well? And broadly, what are the major lessons over these many years? If we have been in ECOWAS for 45 years, And today, we are still closing our border with our neighbors to make our population consume our local grown rice. We need to be very wary about what to expect from intra-African trade. To me, the key word is competitiveness. Lack of competitiveness in the past had led us to deindustrialization. We lost Dunlop, Michelin, the textile industries in Ikorodu, Ikeja, Kaduna, Kano. We even lost Ileology Industries. We produce cocoa. All we need to do was to process and sell. I was in Singapore. I saw a big shop with a big cocoa tree in front of it. All they were selling was chocolate. And the shop was always full. We produce crude and we import refined products. And the subsidy we are paying on refined products is enough to strangulate this country. Ladies and gentlemen, why is this so? We can go on recounting. I believe that our greatest problem is that we are not competitive. Why are we not competitive? Our infrastructure, roads, power, etc., must be such that enable our products and industries to compete by ensuring optimum costs. Competitive with the rest of the world. Our education system must be one that is inclusive and qualitative. It's certainly not inclusive because we see so many children out of school, whether it's in Lagos or any part of Nigeria. And it's now particularly so in the Northeast with the displaced communities. This indeed, if we have inclusive education and qualitative education, this will be reflected in the quality of our human capital and consequently its level of productivity. So much has been said of recent of our security. Unless, I'm not going to dwell on that much because we all hear, we all listen to the news, we all know what is happening about security. You know, without security of life and property, no economy can develop. We need conducive environment, consistent, for government to be able to encourage private sector to invest, either Nigerians or foreigners. Everybody needs conducive environment where policies are constant and government can be predicted. Then, of course, we need culture of service excellence, which, like Ron Kaufman, which realizes that service is the currency that keeps the economy moving. In countries where there is good service, you go either to the hospitals, to the shops, anywhere. When you get there, you will like to come back because the service they have provided is inviting. Of course, we need a culture of hard work. Those who have ever tried to set up industries in their villages, you will know problems you have with getting people to really work hard and make sure they produce and earn their pay. Lastly, but critically important, is application of appropriate technology. Gentlemen, I do not underestimate the possible value and impact of intra-African trade on our economic growth and development. The impact can be tremendous. Its potential cannot be underestimated. With a population base of 1.2 billion people, a GDP of 2.5 trillion, it is my hope that this symposium, with a very carefully selected key speaker and the highly talented panel of discussants, will reach conclusions and make recommendations that will enable our country maximize for economic growth and development our benefits as a member of the African Continental Free Trade Area. I am positive that we will enjoy the symposium. I look forward to a robust deliberation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Chief Joseph Sanusi. A few quick announcements before we go to the keynote session. There's free Wi-Fi, so you can save your data and log on to ISN CVL, and the password is free Wi-Fi. So the service provider is ISN CVL, and the password is free Wi-Fi. The first panel is the panel on intra-African trade growth and economic development. The second panel is a youth panel, and the theme is intra-African trade and youth inclusion. The third panel is trans-border trade and manufacturing across Africa, influencing policy for an enabling environment. And the last and the fourth panel is young innovators, and the theme is innovators across frontiers, the new economy champion of Africa. Trust me, all 4 panels will be worth your while. Each of them is going to run for just about between 20 to 30 minutes. So I'd ask that you all please stay back. Okay, it's now my pleasure to welcome I'd like to take a moment to recognize a few persons. The Lagos State Sector Commander of the Federal Road Safety Commission, Mr. Hyginus Omeje, represented by Hawa Olowo Okere. Please stand to be recognized. Hawa Olowo Okere. We have Barrister Natasha Akpoti, gubernatorial candidate of the SDP in the last governorship elections in Kogi State. Please stand to be recognized. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's welcome Dr. Benedict Oranma for his keynote address. I'd ask that we please put your phones on silent mode and let's pay attention for the key reason, the primary reason for which we are gathered here this morning, intra-African trade. There's no better person to deliver the lecture at this time than Benedict Oranma in his capacity as the president of the Africa Export-Import Bank. Please give him a very warm round of applause.
Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Happy birthday, Pat. Your Excellency, Deputy Governors, our hosts, Professor and Professor Mrs. Utomi, the former Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Dr. Sanusi, our big brother and the pathfinder, Mr. Pascal Dozier, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Since the African Continental Free Trade opened for signature in March 2018, I've had several opportunities to speak on the subject, both within and outside our continent, Africa. I've had to do that because, as you know, it was something nobody ever knew would happen. I'm pleased that the debate has today gathered steam in tandem with the enthusiasm with which the landmark agreement has been received across our continent. For the first time, Africa and Africans are increasingly being taken seriously. I accepted to speak today without hesitation and dear friend, but also because of the passion attached to the subject matter. Inter-African trade constitutes the inner core of our vision and strategy at Afrexim Bank. That's why we are actively promoting continental awareness and conscious awakening on the ideological, philosophical, and economic imperatives of that developmental pathway. I'm grateful to the Center for Values in Leadership and its founder, Professor Pascal Utomi, as well as the chair of the board, Professor Mrs. Utomi, for honoring me and our bank with this unique opportunity to address this illustrious gathering. I must stress, though, that when part, the true Pan-Africanist, the colossus in academia and business course, not even the dreaded novel coronavirus can stand in the way. Your Excellencies, Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, economic miracles occur once every few decades. During the 1970s and 1980s, Hong Kong, South Korea, Singapore and Taiwan burst upon the scene with a force that surprised even the most optimistic. The Asian tigers, as they were then known, moved from poverty to relative prosperity on a platform of export-led growth, powered by rapid industrialization, hinged on light manufacturing and foreign direct investments, especially from transnational corporations. These countries quickly reached full employment, so that by the late 1980s and early 1990s, tight labor markets raised wages, rendering most of their labor-intensive activities uncompetitive in global markets. China, with its large population and attendant low-wage labor force, soon stepped in, drawing on the same playbook, but boosted by WTO-induced globalization in the 90s to achieve the most phenomenal economic miracle ever, with about 800 million people pulled out of poverty in less than 2 decades. All of a sudden, a country which not so long ago could barely feed its people became a global economic powerhouse and the world's factory. Since the 2000s, no nation or group of countries have achieved such phenomenal and rapid transformation as the Southeast Asian economies. There's a strong sentiment, though, that it's time for another miracle, and all eyes are on Africa. This view has been expressed by many development experts. And for me, between 2012 and 2014, I met on a number of occasions with the chairperson of Mitsubishi UFJ Bank. And on each occasion, he would pull me aside and tell me that America has had its time, that Europe has had its time, that Asia has had its time, and that it's time for Africa. Even the great singer, Beyoncé, in her transcendental journey of musical reflection, also agrees. But beyond those wishful expectations, all the ingredients are there for Africa to bolt away from decades of poverty and become a developed economy. Demographics and natural resources are two important elements that can potentially transform the economic fortunes of Africa. We only just need to unlock those potentials. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, permit me for a moment to explore with you the power of population and demographics. In 1798, Reverend Robert Malthus wrote in what became known as the Malthusian Spectre, and I quote, "Famine seems to be the most dreadful resource of nature. The power of population is so superior to the power of the earth to produce subsistence for man that premature death must in some shape or other visit the human race." In essence, Reverend Malthus was arguing that uncontrolled population growth rate will be catastrophic for man. Based on that, he made certain proposals about controlling population. And many African economies actually followed those arguments in the 1960s and 1970s. However, recent evidence suggests that Reverend Malthus might not have been entirely correct. We know today that high population can be a time bomb, just as it can also be an asset. It is the quality of the people that matter, not really the number of the people. Abundant, highly skilled, low-wage labor powered the transformation of the Asian tigers as well as China. We now know that quality, large population is an asset because it creates a large labor pool and sizable markets that can drive the growth of consumption and investment. The important thing is that you must have good quality people. Africa is today at the top league of the highly populated continents, with a population of more than 1.3 billion people, or 16% of the world. That is a very high population. In fact, the continent is expected to have 25% of the world population by 2050. The unique feature of this population is that it is a very young population, with 77% expected to be below 40 by 2035. 45% are expected to be between 15 and 40 years by that year. Another interesting feature of this demographic is that it is similar to those of the Asian tigers at the time of their respective economic takeoff. Today, there's so much talk about the youth bulge. Some are predicting Armageddon because of the rising youth population. I beg to differ somewhat, because I know that in terms of population density, Africa is in fact third in rank behind Asia and Europe. I'm convinced that Africa's rich, youthful population can be an asset. The conventional wisdom in our countries, in many parts of Africa, is that the greatest asset we have are our natural resources. But I don't really think so. I think our greatest assets are our people. If we consider if we bring it to our homes, consider a situation in somebody who is in his home, there are no restaurants. You can have all the food you can think of, but if you don't know how to cook the food, you will go hungry. We must therefore create the conditions, the learnings that will convert our youth into men and women of action. Eric Hoffer, my favorite American philosopher, once wrote, and I quote, "In a time of drastic change, it is the learners who inherit the future. The learned find themselves equipped to live a world which no longer exists." But besides the people, Africa is also highly endowed with natural resources. A massive land area of 30 million square kilometers with abundant water supply. It is indeed a little explored continent, even today. In addition to the vast arable land, the continent boasts of enormous amounts of mineral and agricultural resources. You can see some of those resources. 90% of world cobalt, 75% of world cocoa, 6% of global coffee, 50% of world gold, and so on. But distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you may ask me, why is this simultaneous occurrence of abundance and poverty? Why a continent so much endowed with human and natural resources continues to find itself at the lowest rungs of the development ladder? Why has a continent that appeared to have repeatedly won nature's or God's lottery in terms of distribution of natural resources failed to cash in? Why is there poverty in the midst of plenty? Why does a continent that boasted so many powerful kingdoms in history, the pharaohs of Egypt, the old Mali Empire, the Benin Empire, the Kingdom of Monomotapa, the Great Zimbabwe, and so on, why has it fallen so far behind today? To understand how Africa found itself in this unacceptable situation, I invite you to a brief historical excursion. Starting with the pre-colonial period, 14th to 16th century, let's look at what happened to Africa subsequently. At that time, many kingdoms thrived across Africa by trading amongst themselves, as well as with Indians, Chinese, Arabs, and later the Europeans, especially the Portuguese and the Spaniards. Historical records show that trading patterns in West Africa were so established that the Portuguese struggled to break into the networks. For instance, the Harvard professor, Professor Kempong, wrote that blue cloth and beads were exported from the old Benin Empire to the Gold Coast at present-day Ghana. It is this kind of trade that brought prosperity to old Benin Kingdom and Kewa off the coast of Tanzania, which made the Europeans to marvel when they first set foot on those shores of Africa. For instance, Portuguese seafarer. Thank you. For instance, the Portuguese seafarer Lorenzo Pinto visited the old kingdom. His astonishment made him to write, and I quote, "Great Benin, where the king resides, is larger than Lisbon. All the streets run straight and as far as the eyes can see. The houses are large, especially that of the king, which is richly decorated and has fine columns. The city is wealthy and industrious. It is so well governed that theft is unknown, and the people live in such security that they have no doors to their houses. With the abolition of slavery and the advent of industrial revolution in the 1800s, the metropolitan powers had two main goals, namely to secure a reliable source of raw materials as well as export markets for their manufactures. Colonialism set in, founded on a strategy so well laid out in the writings of former colonial administrator Mr. Sarau, that we are today still living under the throes of that strategy. Let me just outline that strategy as written by Mr. Sarau. I do this because for me, This one-page statement is the greatest argument in support of intra-African trade. Mr. Sarah wrote, and I quote, economically, a colonial possession means to the home country simply a privileged market whence it will draw the raw materials it needs, dumping its own manufactures in return. Economic policy is reduced to rudimentary procedures of gathering crops and bartering them. Moreover, by strictly imposing on the colonial dependency the exclusive consumption of its manufactured products, the metropolis prevents any efforts to use or manufacture local raw materials on the spot and any contact with the rest of the world. The colony is forbidden to establish any industry, to improve itself by economic progress, to arise above the stage of producing raw materials, or to do business with the neighboring territories for its own enrichment across the customs barriers erected by the metropolitan powers. It is thanks to the flawless execution of this strategy that today Africa is so fragmented such that it is the continent with the highest number of countries. It's a continent with 84,000 kilometers of borders. It is no wonder that today Kenya imports hides and skin from outside Africa at a much higher cost than Burundi around the corner exports the same to the rest of the world. It is for the same reason that an average Nigerian knows far more about Europe than he or she knows about West Africa. Colonialism ended some 60 years ago, so we cannot continue to blame colonialism for Africa's malaise. After all, Asia was also colonized, but quickly rose to take advantage of the opportunity offered by independence. But we must use the lessons of history to chart our vision for tomorrow. Let's learn why we are where we are. Bearing that in mind, my position is that the way forward for Africa is that we must reverse engineer the colonial strategy so aptly captured by Mr. Abbas Sarau. A key element of that reverse engineering is that we must trade amongst ourselves as Africans. It is by doing so that we can build industrial capacities and create a favorable environment for investment in regional infrastructure. We cannot attract private investment into Africa's infrastructure to bridge the $100 billion per annum infrastructure gap unless a business case can be made for that. Every time we say that infrastructure gap is 100 billion per annum over 10 years, and then Africa will be like every other continent. That would be $1 trillion in 10 years. The total budget today, total budget of all African countries is just about that size over the same 10 years. So even if African countries spend all their budget on infrastructure, they cannot build the infrastructure, meet the financing need. What it means is that private investments will be called for. But private investments cannot come unless we can make the business case. You can only make the business case if you trade amongst yourself and create the environment for businesses to grow. To me, intra-African trade is therefore the instrument for breaking away from Africa's colonial past and its legacy. I must quickly add, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, that the change the continent needs to achieve will not come easy. Between 50 and 70 years ago, the continent witnessed epic battles for political independence. Those who fought and won the continent's political independence knew that it was only the beginning of a long journey, that the final destination would be economic independence. Kwame Nkrumah harped on this over and over. In my speech in Moscow in June last year, on the occasion of Afreximbank's annual meeting, I described what the struggle would demand of us under the current situation of gaining economic independence. And I quote, "A revolution is sweeping across the African continent without bloodshed or conflict. It is peaceful and will fundamentally alter our world, shatter old assumptions, and reshape our lives. It is easy to underestimate, as it is not accompanied by banners or fanfare. The revolutionaries are of a different breed. Instead of being trained in military camps, the freedom fighters for the new battle are being trained in technical schools and universities. Instead of fighting in trenches, this battle will be fought in factory floors and tech incubation centers. Instead of guns, the battle will be fought with ideas, hard work, and investments. While bravery was required for the political struggle, courage is a necessity for the economic liberation struggle. Technology are not armed guerrillas. Ideas are not bullets will constitute the potent forces for victory in this new struggle. And as with the political struggle, Africa needs partners that can support it to prevail. The partnership we seek is one beyond aid and grant, but one founded on mutual respect and trust, win-win economic cooperation, and pursuit of shared prosperity. I'm pleased that our leaders have fired the first shot in that new struggle. Against all odds, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement was signed in Kigali in March 2018. And by July 2019, it had achieved enough ratifications to come into force. And just yesterday, I came from Addis Ababa, where we interviewed candidates who would head that organization. So we are on track. By July, countries who have ratified will be expected to open their borders. For the first time, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Africa and Africans have decided to take their destinies in their own hands. It is a step that allows us to begin to rebuild the African economy and restore self-esteem to Africans. A step that will forever break down the 84,000 kilometers of borders that divide us into small, balkanized units. A key economic argument in favor of the FCFTA is that it will help African economies to industrialize and improve Africa's share of global manufacturing output. So many studies have been conducted to tell us, which show the benefits derivable from regional integration and intra-African trade. Although the trading will start in July this year, we need to make sure that when the trading starts, that everybody is ready. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, late last year I delivered 2 keynote speeches in Nigeria, one at the state dinner hosted by the federal government as part of the 59th independence anniversary celebration, and the second at the annual meeting of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, all on this same subject. At that event, I emphasized that any country confronted with a potential change of massive proportions as may emanate from the AFCFTA must put in place well-articulated plans, both short, medium, and long-term, to enable it manage the risks and also take advantage of the opportunities. I made a number of proposals, and with your permission, I will repeat some of them here. I said the governments must, as a priority, focus on minimizing the fiscal revenue losses that the AFCFTA may engender. Why do I start with this? The beginnings of this will be the most difficult. What we have in Africa are two groups of countries. Most of the countries in the continent belong to the first group, the group that looks at tariffs as a source of revenue. There is a second group of countries led by South Africa that looks at tariffs as an industrial policy, not as a source of revenue. But because many countries in Africa look at tariffs as a source of revenue, the greatest risk the FCFTA faces is the risk that countries will lose revenues and lose their faith in this project so early. It is for the same reason, it is because of this reason that the AFCFTA adjustment facility was negotiated into the AFCFTA agreement. The second proposal I made is that governments should ensure that the private sector is well prepared to take advantage of the market opportunity the FCFTA will throw open. Well, this also requires adjustment at the corporate level. Many of the companies we have in many countries in Africa are import substitution companies. So they need to retool. They need to have a rethink of their business strategy. And it's up to the government to organize the trainings, to provide the funding, the financing arrangement that will prepare these companies, these corporations, to be able to participate effectively in the trading that will emerge from the AFCFTA. The third is availability of trade information. To me, this is a very, very critical element. The greatest challenge, in our view, to intra-regional trade is lack of trade information. Many of us say that the greatest challenge to intra-African trade is lack of infrastructure. Our view is the infrastructure problem is a generalized problem. Today, the stock of infrastructure is able to carry $1 trillion of total African trade. The question is, why is intra-African trade share of the $1 trillion just $160 billion? Just a paltry share of that trade. It is because of the colonial heritage. The businessman in Nigeria does not know what's going on in Niger. We do not understand the markets around us. We know the markets outside us more than we know the markets across the border. That is why it is important that we deal with this trade information challenge as quickly as possible. Otherwise, the businesses will be ready, but they will presumably see no markets to attack. The fourth recommendation I made is that although the AFCFTA offers an opportunity to industrialize and expand export manufacturing, it will be up to the government and the private sector to seize that opportunity. The goods have to be produced competitively and traded. Access to markets is critical, as no meaningful production can occur if goods produced cannot be sold. So in addition to the trade information agreement, we propose that governments promote or support the emergence of export trading companies in the different African countries. We believe that the fact that most of intra-African trade is today conducted informally, that is evidence of institutional failure. The market woman leaves Ghana with $3,000 to come to Lagos to buy a few things and go back. It is because there's no institution to do that. If there are institutions to do that, that trade will be conducted more effectively, more efficiently, to the benefit of everybody. That is why we must look at creating export trading companies. I don't know how many of us here who know the SMEs that produce many of the things that come out of South Korea or Japan. Instead, we know about Daewoo, about Samsung, about Mitsubishi. We do not know the many SMEs that are producing things they export around the world. We must promote the emergence of export trading companies if we want the AFCFTA to operate effectively. Countries must also find a way to brand themselves. Branding is critical because many of the companies that are going to go into the market will be small. They will not have enough money to market their goods. So it will be a wise thing for countries to create country brands. And for Nigeria, the Nollywood industry creates an opportunity for its use in promoting Made in Nigeria brand. Many of us here use jeans, Levi's jeans. But we forget that Levi's jeans was always there in the 1950s. It was not popular until Marlon Brando used it in one of his movies, and Levi's jeans became popular around the world. The FCFTA will also require that goods of high quality standards be traded within the free trade area. But many countries, including Nigeria, do not have enough quality infrastructure. Today, African Bank, the African Regional Standard Organization, and the AU are working to develop standards covering so many aspects. These will be the standards that would govern the goods that are traded. When these standards are created and adopted, countries must have the infrastructure to make sure that the goods are produced to those standards. If we don't have those, we will not participate effectively. Again, financing is very, very critical in promoting intra-regional trade. Financing is needed not only to finance the trade, but also to finance the production of goods that will enter the trade. Africa is capital scarce. We do not have enough money to support, to finance activities, to finance the creation of capacities to produce. Even at the multilateral level, the multilateral development banks, we do not have much. Take, for example, if you combine the total assets of the African Development Bank, African Export-Import Bank, African Finance Corporation, the Development Bank of West African States, the Trade and Development Bank in East Africa, and so on, the total assets are less than $100 billion. And the continent has $2.5 trillion in GDP. That is grossly inadequate. Compared to China, the total assets of China Development Bank, China Consortium Bank, China Exim Bank, the total assets to their total GDP exceeds 100%. In Africa, we are talking of less than 10%. We have to do something about it if we want to begin to change the structure of the economies and trade more amongst ourselves. I also think that each country, every country in Africa must create an agency that will manage the FCFTA transition process. that will manage how the countries participate in the AFCFTA. It is not something we will leave in the vacuum. It's not something we will leave to multi-agency intervention. Countries that have focus will be the biggest beneficiaries. Permit me now to spend a few more minutes to tell you a few things that Afreximbank itself is doing to support the AFCFTA. Most of the activities and interventions of Afreximbank are targeting some of those issues I pointed out. I will enumerate some of them. Afreximbank has an intra-African trade strategy. Under that intra-African trade strategy, Afreximbank has committed to disburse $25 billion on a revolving basis by the end of 2021. And we have defined intra-African trade to be trade within the geographic space called Africa, and also trade between Africa and Africans in diaspora. Just the way the AU now includes the diaspora as the 6th region of Africa. Afreximbank has also put in place an African trade facilitation program. Under that program, we are targeting to provide letter of credit confirmation facilities to support intra-African trade, because these facilities do not exist sufficiently today. Our target is to onboard 500 of the 600 banks across Africa and to grant lines of $8 billion by 2021. And today, we have already onboarded 400 of those banks. Another important constraint that, to intra-regional trade is the balkanization of the continent. So many countries, so many currencies, I think about 36 currencies. That has created a big problem for the continent. Created a big problem in selling goods, a big problem in selling services. Without dealing with this problem, even the people who do creatives, who produce movies, will not gain the most from their output. Because a movie producer, a music producer in Nigeria, who puts his music or her music on a platform, may not get somebody, say, in Zambia to buy it. Because that person in Zambia buying it must have a credit card that will make it possible for him or her to pay in US dollars. So Afreximbank has developed and launched, together with the African Union, a Pan-African payment and settlement system. The Pan-African payment and settlement system will do settlements, it will clear currency, it will make it possible for Africans to pay for goods and services in the intra-African trade consent in the local currencies. We are starting the piloting in the West African Monetary Zone in the coming weeks. Further, in order to support countries likely to suffer fiscal revenue losses, I mentioned to you about adjustment facility. The adjustment facility has been negotiated into the agreement, but there's nobody to put the money up. So working with the African Union, Afreximbank is now arranging a $3.5 billion AFCFTA adjustment facility. This adjustment facility will make it possible for two things to happen. For countries that want to cover the revenue gap, the tariff reductions or removals that will arrive from the tariff reductions can draw from that facility. Companies that need to retool, to prepare themselves properly to participate in the trade can also draw from the facility. We've also created a subsidiary called the Fund for Export Development in Africa. This fund is targeting to support activities in dynamic sectors. Those activities that produce goods that are traded within the continent, manufacturing, entertainment, that the creatives, and so on. The fund has already been launched and is beginning to do business. Afrexim Bank also established a project preparation facility because we know that companies need to prepare their projects properly to be able to attract the financing. Governments that want to do projects on a PPP basis need to have the funds to prepare those projects. And this project preparation facility is targeting those entities. And in order to improve access to trade information, recall that I told you that our view is that trade information is a major constraint to intra-African trade. To improve access to that, we are building, as we speak, a trade information portal that will use artificial intelligence to predict supply chains across the continent. That trade information will pull trade data from across the customs all around the world, making it possible for us to use predictive powers to predict supply chains. I expect that we'll launch that trade information portal before the end of this quarter. But in 2018, working with the African Union, we launched the Intra-African Trade Fair. The Intra-African Trade Fair, which has created a marketplace for all Africans together. In 2018, more than 1,000 exhibitors participated, attracting about 10,000 visitors and buyers. The next edition of the trade fair will hold in Kigali between the 1st and 7th of September this year. You are all invited to attend. Afrexim Bank is also supporting the work of the African Union and the African Regional Standard Organization to establish necessary standards covering various sectors. We are prioritizing those sectors that will have the greatest impact, especially automobiles. We are also developing quality infrastructure across Africa. One of such centers is being developed today in Nigeria, in Ogun State. The bank is also in collaboration with the Obafemi Awolowo University, my university, in the process of creating we are creating a center for AFCFTA studies. We believe that through such centers that we can begin to understand what is happening at grassroots with the implementation of the AFCFTA. That center will coordinate research all across Africa. We are developing that, and the plan is to involve as many research centers and universities as possible. And in partnership with King's College Hospital, London, and the federal government of Nigeria, the bank is developing an African Medical Center of Excellence in Abuja. That center is a tertiary healthcare center that will use state-of-the-art diagnostics to support care for very complex diseases, especially oncology, hematology, including sickle cell and cardiovascular diseases. We also see the youth as very, very important asset, as I said. And I'm happy that we have a panel for the youth. But we know that the creative industry is a very, very strong avenue for promoting the youth, unleashing the power of the youth. So Afrexim Bank is supporting the creative industry. Just a few weeks ago, we did a Creative Africa Exchange in Kigali. At that event, we launched a facility of $500 million to support African creatives